Greetings and salutations, everybody. It's IXLJ, the OG from Cole TV, and welcome back to Back in the Day. Now, here on Back in the Day, we like to take a look back at the rich history of World Championship Wrestling and highlight some of the greatest matches, rivalries, merch, and so much more. But as always, we kick it off with our top story of the week. And for this week's top story, we're going all the way back to the summer of 1998. We're going to talk about the mega matchup, the tag team matchup from Bash at the Beach 1998 that saw Diamond Dallas Page team up with the mailman Karl Malone to go up against Hollywood Hulk Hogan and Dennis Rodman. So I was a huge NBA fan in the 90s as a kid, man. I mean, the NBA in the 90s to me is the greatest era of all basketball. I was so blown away when we got to see the NBA get involved with professional wrestling, or at least see basketball players get involved. So as we all know, Hollywood Hogan and Dennis Rodman have been friends for years, actually. As a matter of fact, the first time we ever saw Dennis Rodman on screen was actually at Bash at the Beach 1995, where he was in Hulk Hogan's corner against Big Van Vader. Of course, we all know we did get to see old Rod Silla in action at Bash at the Beach 1997, where he teamed up with Hogan to go up against the Giant and Lex Luger in a tag team match. But this matchup was all the more all about the hype because Karl Malone was now getting involved. And you got to keep in mind, too, the Bulls and the Jazz were playing in the NBA Finals this year, and we're in the middle of a heated rivalry there. Which I find a little more fascinating, too, that Malone and Rodman were able to coexist and work together in this matchup. Because this is a fun matchup. And it's actually pretty entertaining and really was surprising to see what all they could do. But you got to consider, we're talking some top-notch athletes. Now, as far as Karl Malone's involvement goes, as the legend goes, Diamond Dallas Page was attending a Utah Jazz game. Karl Malone spotted him out of the crowd and threw up the Diamond Cutter sign. Well, ended up getting to talk to DDP and expressed his interest of getting in the ring. And let's face facts, Karl Malone looked like $1 million, man. I mean, he was like, I don't think there was a shred of fat on his body at this time. And it worked out great for WCW, too, the fact that the Bulls and the Jazz did meet in the finals. Because this is right after the finals wrapped up, so they could go and play off of that heat. Of course, we all know, the Bulls ended up ultimately winning that series. But when we get to Bash at the Beach 1998, like I say, this matchup really surprised me with what Malone and Rodman were able to do in this encounter, and that they were able to coexist and throw down in it. And I mean, the entire sports world was talking about this too. I mean, I was an avid fan of watching ESPN. I can remember getting up as a kid in the morning, that part of my routine of watching ESPN and the highlights, and I can remember they highlighted the crap out of this matchup. I mean, this got WCW so much press coverage. And you got to keep in mind, too, at this time frame, WCW was still, a dominant force in the world of professional wrestling. Of course, they would mess it up a month later and have Jay Leno wrestle. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this war between Karl Malone, the mailman, and DDP against Hollywood Hogan and Rod Silla, Dennis Rodman. And this was just a moment in time, too, that the entire wrestling world had eyes on it because everybody wanted to see this matchup and see what Rodman and Malone would do. And like I say, they delivered in this matchup. And it's our top story of the week here on Back in the Day. Now, here on Back in the Day, we always like to take a look back at some of the great matches throughout the history of World Championship Wrestling. And I have an amazing matchup I want to highlight today, and I think this is kind of a hidden gem matchup, in my opinion. I want to take you back to the Great American Bash of 1995 in the opening contest, where Das Wunderkid, Alex Wright, would go one-on-one against Flying Brian Pillman. Now, at the time, Das Wunderkid, Alex Wright, was one of the most popular wrestlers in WCW, and they really were pushing him as the young, bright star in the future of World Championship Wrestling. And if you look back on this time frame, usually Alex Wright was typically in the opening match or one of the first matches on the WCW pay-per-view shows, and they would put him up against talent to make him look really great. Like everybody from John Paul Lefebvre, yes, Triple H, to Paul Roma, to Bobby Eaton, Arn Anderson, and the list goes on and on. And as great as those competitors was, I really feel like the matchup with Flying Brian Pillman was the one where it was the most even in style. Because Brian Pillman was a well-known high flyer throughout the years, and Das Wunderkind, yes, he was the European expert, but he was also a high flyer himself. And this was a great opening matchup at the Great American Bash. You couldn't ask for a better opening matchup on any pay-per-view, really. It was a back-and-forth encounter. A lot of high-flying maneuvers as well as some European-style wrestling. Some great map work as too. They told a great story in this matchup. And it was just a matchup between two incredible athletes, which both Alex Wright and Brian Pillman were. And of course, ultimately, Das Wunderkind would pick up the win and continue his momentum. But this is a heck of a great matchup. I always remember one of my favorite spots in this matchup is where Alex Wright goes to throw a drop kick and Brian Pillman does at the same time. It's pretty awesome. The timing on it was pretty awesome, I always thought. And that's why it's our match of the week here on Back in the Day. Now here on Back in the Day, we always like to take a look at some of the great rivalries all throughout World Championship Wrestling's history. And for this week, I want to go back to the year of 1992, essentially. And I want to talk about the incredible rivalry between Ravishing Rick Rude and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Now, this all really started at the end of 1991, where you had the Dangerous Alliance was running amok all throughout World Championship Wrestling, was taking out the top baby faces in WCW, and of course Ricky the Dragon Steamboat would be one of those baby faces that was targeted by the Dangerous Alliance. And all throughout the latter months of WCW, Ricky Steamboat would have several encounters with different members of the Dangerous Alliance, such as Stunning Steve Austin, Larry Zbyszko, and Bobby Eaton, Arn Anderson. Then at Starrcade 1991, as part of the Battle Bowl Battle Royal, Ricky Steamboat would actually eliminate Ravishing Rick Rude from the Battle Royal. Now, Rick Rude would come in afterwards and hit the Rude Awakening on Ricky Steamboat, which would ultimately lead to Ricky Steamboat being eliminated from the match as well. Now, to counteract all the Dangerous Alliance's interference, interestingly enough, Ricky Steamboat would have a ninja in his corner. I don't know, it was WCW in 92. What can you do? And they would have, like I said, this would lead to the matchup they'd have at WCW Super Brawl 2 for the United States Championship. And it looked like Ricky Steamboat was going to win this matchup because one of the stipulations going into this matchup, because of all the ridiculous interference, Paul E. Dangerously was banned from ringside. Or was he? As yes, ultimately it would turn out that apparently whoever was playing the ninja had got jumped by the Dangerous Alliance, and Paul E. would play the role of the ninja, thus ultimately costing the matchup for Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and Ravishing Rick Rude would retain his United States Championship. Now, after Super Brawl 2, they would still be a lot of back and forth, as Steamboat and Rude were practically married to the hip for several months on television, as well as working a multitude of house shows. And the rivalry got even more intense somehow when Ravishing Rick Rude would take Paulie Dangerously's cell phone and bash it in Ricky Steamboat's face, and thus breaking Ricky Steamboat's nose. Now, the blow-off matchup between these two is phenomenal, as they would meet at Beach Blast 1992 in a 30-minute Iron Man match. Now, keep in mind, though, the United States Championship would not be on the line. And this is just a textbook incredible matchup between two very skilled veterans at the time. And the back and forth is phenomenal. It did end up going in Ricky Steamboat's advantage, as he would win this matchup 4 falls to 3. However, though, that U.S. title was not on the line, thus Rick Rude did not drop his championship belt. But Ricky Steamboat did get some revenge by winning this incredible matchup. And that would pretty much be the conclusion of their rivalry, but it was a fun one to watch between two incredible professional wrestlers. And like we've talked about many times here before, what makes a great rivalry is truly great chemistry. And Ravishing Rick Rude and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat had just that. And thus, it's your feud of the week here on Back in the Day. Now, if you follow me on social media, you know I'm a huge collector. And one of those things I love to collect is wrestling magazines. And I always like to take a look back here on Back in the Day at some of the great magazines involving WCW throughout the years. It's going to be a little different this week, because this week I kind of want to take a look at something outside of just traditional WCW magazine. We're going to be taking a look at Pro Wrestling Illustrated's Year in Review 1995, the PWI Awards from March of 1996. Let's check it out. And there you see we got several WCW talents on the cover here. A lot of them winning awards. Everybody from the Macho Man to Alex Wright to Harlem Heat. So let's check them out. And of course they're talking about the Year in Review. Do we really have to talk about this though? Hulk Hogan against the Giant. When the Giant was thrown off the roof of Cobo Hall and somehow miraculously made it to the main event. And God, don't get me started about the Yeti. I always had the year-end top 10 list. I always loved it. Oh my God, we're talking about the Hulkster again. Top 10 pet peeves of Hulk Hogan. Yellow and red's so hard to accessorize. Randy Savage always putting Dice Slim Jims in his Hulkaroni and cheese. That one annoying hair that gets in the eyes. Anything more than occasional title defenses. Oh! Offered Mr. Freeze movie role when he really wanted to be Batman. Brother. Black t-shirts don't tear as easily as yellow ones. Unable to market to the pay-per-view Mr. Nanny the match, the movie. I love that. Slow action figure sales. Cold Hulkios. And number one. Ever since the mustache got Dave constantly carded in bars. Because yes, he did shave his mustache at this time frame. PWI's top 10, and there you see at the time, Randy Savage is a WCW World Heavyweight Champion. He is number 1, the Hulkster at number 3, and it's pretty much WWF and New Japan wrestlers. Oh, the Sting and Johnny B. Bad are on the list, though. And speaking of WCW, let's look at the top 10 there. So, oh, look, number 1 is Kensuke Sasaki, who was the United States Heavyweight Champion, so I guess we could count him as a WCW roster member. The Hulkster, Lex Luger, Johnny B. Bad, Sting the Giant, Chris Benoit, Ric Flair, DDP, and Bubba Rogers. Now, of course, too, what's going to be very important about this issue, in 1995, this is the beginning of the Monday Night Roar, because remember, WCW Nitro would premiere in the latter part of 1995. Oh, some quotables. Oh, what's the Stinger got to say? I won't take my belt and hide, unlike some champions in this federation. Ooh. Oh, Lex Luger, when I give my word to someone like I did to Hogan and Sting and Savage, I keep my word. Uh-oh. Oh, what's Jimmy Mouth of the South got to say here? You better believe people can trust me, but more importantly, Hulk Hogan can trust me. Of course, yeah. He would turn on the Hulkster and be a part of the Dungeon of Doom. And, of course, we got the injury report from 1995. And let's see if we had some WCW injuries here. Oh, looks like Hulkster suffered injuries to his neck when he had the neck twisted by the Giant at Fall Brawl. Oh, we're going with that. Oh, yeah, I remember this. Road Warrior Hawk getting his right elbow ripped off, essentially, from Kurosawa. Man, the selling of Road Warrior Hawk for this was ridiculous, too, by the way. Okay, the PWI Achievement 95 Awards. Let's see how well the WCW does for awards this year. Right off the bat, we got a Rookie of the Year as Das Wunderkind. Alex Wright would be the magazine, the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Rookie of the Year for 1995. And hey, Sergeant Craig Pitbull Pittman was a runner-up. Most Improved Wrestler of the Year was one Diamond Dallas Page. I gotta agree with that, because DDP had a pretty stellar 1995. Actually, it was his first real year where it kind of felt like they were actually utilizing him. He'd go on to win the WCW World Television Championship, had a fun rivalry with Johnny B. Bad, and Dave Sullivan. Yes, I said it. Oh, look at the comeback of the year. It's the Macho Man, Randy Savage. Oh, yeah, can you dig it? Yeah, and I think that's pretty appropriate, because, I mean, he'd been kind of into the WWF just doing commentary, but coming to the WCW in 94 and really being pushed as a main event wrestler, which is where he should be. And for your Tag Team of the Year, it would be awarded to Harlem Heat, and rightfully so. Harlem Heat was dominating the tag team title scene in WCW all throughout 1995. Of course, we've highlighted here before back in the day that incredible rivalry with the Nasty Boys. And they held the WCW tag titles throughout most of the year, so it makes sense for them to be the tag team of the year for PWI. Oh, and how about this? Editor's Award will go to Ricky Steamboat. or Rick Steamboat. Of course, Ricky Steamboat had to retire in 1994 due to a back injury. And of course, when he retired, he was still an active competitor in WCW. And I love the unofficial official awards for 1995. Let's take a look at some of the WCW highlights. Oh boy, this should be good. Even worse than the original, the Renegade. Now, nowadays, this quote would be more like if you ordered the Ultimate Warrior on Wish.com. Oh, yes. No. Yes. No. I don't care how stupid I look on national TV. Just give me my paycheck. Yeah. Oh, she wanted some TLC from KFC. Sister Sherry and Colonel Parker. Let's take a look at the title changes of 1995 in WCW. So for the television title, you had Arn Anderson start the year as he defeat Johnny B. Bad for it. Then he would drop it to the Renegade. The Renegade would drop it to DDP, and DDP would drop it back to Johnny B. Bad. For your U.S. title, Sting would defeat Ming in the finals of a U.S. title tournament. And Kensuke Sasaki would defeat Sting for the championship back in November. For your WCW title, the only title change really was Randy Savage as he won the World War III Battle Royale. The tag team titles, the Nasty Boys would beat Harlem Heat at Slamboree 95, then Harlem Heat would win them back. They dropped them to Buckhouse Buck and Dick Slater, but they would regain them shortly thereafter. And also, look at this one. A lot of people forget that. The American Males would defeat Harlem Heat and hold them for about a week and drop them back to the Harlem Heat. And I always love the Year in Review comics. Let's see what we got here. Oh, Dumb and Dumber. Oh, yeah. Ego. No egos this time. We'll get along. Mr. Flair. Oh, he's adjusted to retirement just fine at the wrestler's home. Because remember, Rick had been forced to retire. Which I find so ironic. This is 1995, folks. And the March 1996 issue of PWI, talking about the 1995 Year in Review Awards, is your magazine of the week here on Back in the Day. And here on Back in the Day, we always like to highlight some of the amazing merch throughout the years of World Championship Wrestling. And we're going to do just that today, as I want to highlight the WCW Mayhem CD, released in 1999. Now, wrestling companies have always done different compilation CDs. A lot of the times it would be like different theme music, but this was slightly different, as WCW Mayhem would take a mixture of theme music and mix it up as well with some other different artists on a CD that had a grand total of 26 tracks. Now, of course, not all these songs were like super long. Like, you have the Nitro theme on here, for example, and that's only like about 30 seconds. But I just remember mainly like the themes off of here. Like, you had Take It, which was the Vampiro / the Dark Carnival theme, which it was the Insane Clown Posse. Which is ironic, too, because ICP was on one of the WWF CDs as well. But I mean, you had DDP's theme, you had Sting's theme was on this CD, Buff Bagwell's Buff, Daddy! I'm sorry, once I get started, I can't stop. You had what I like to call the Midlife Crisis Macho Man theme on here. What up, Mach? And then you also had some of like the wrestlers who would sing their own themes, like Conan doing the Bow Wow Wow Yippee Yo Yippee Yay, and of course, who can forget the classic West Texas Rednecks, Rap is Crap. I hate rap. Curiously enough, also on this CD, you have artists such as Slayer, Metallica, Limp Bizkit, Kid Rock, Cypress Hill, who would all contribute songs to this album. So like I say, it's unique because it's a mixture of wrestling themes as well as some pretty badass songs. So if you have this CD, it was pretty awesome. I wore the hell out of this CD, honestly. And for whatever reason, I just don't think it really got a whole lot of credit. But man, this is actually a pretty good album. If you can get it, download it off of Spotify, YouTube, whatever, I highly recommend you do it. And it's our merch of the week here on Back in the Day. Now, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Back in the Day. But as always, if you love the content here and want to show your support to World Championship Wreckage, please hit that like and subscribe button, because They put out such amazing content on a weekly basis. And speaking of amazing content, if you like the content like this, then why don't you head on over to Cole TV, where you can get some awesome content as well. And we have weekly shows about pro wrestling every week, such as Learning the Ropes and Pro Wrestling 60. Come on over and join the revolution that is Cole TV. Well, once again, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Back in the Day. I'm XLJ the OG, and I'll see you at the matches.